Today, I am reacting to two different videos about the Cambridge Audio CXA81 integrated amplifier. And although these have been out for several years now and they're pretty well reviewed on YouTube, I actually own one of these things and have for a few years. And I use it a lot, and I've really put it through its paces. So I thought it might be interesting to go back to some of the original reviews of these units and fill in gaps in information and generally talk about my personal experience actually owning and using one of these relative to the reviews. And I've picked a couple of reviews from kind of bigger guys in the industry, and we'll see how these are holding up. Now, the first video is going to be from Kevin Deal of Upscale Audio. They were actually selling these things, and with him we'll take a look at the internals of the unit, talk about the features and that kind of thing. I'll make my commentary along the way. Second video will be a Steve Guttenberg review, basically a professional review. He got a sample of one, listened to it for a while, and is talking about it, and I will make my comments along with that video about how it sounds to me, because that one will focus more on sonics and things like that. Basically talk about things that Kevin's didn't. So between those two videos and my commentary, I think you'll get a lot of good insights about this unit. Now, fair warning, this video will probably run a little bit long. If you're interested in these units, I think you'll find this to be a good comprehensive bunch of information on it. Now, specifically, this is about the original or Mark I version of the CXA81. More recently, Cambridge has put out a Mark II, which is basically a kind of a minor revision. Basically, it's an updated version of the same ESS Sabre DAC chip and just a few minor changes in other components. I'm not under the impression that the Mark IIs sound substantially different from the originals at all. So I think a lot of what I have to say should apply to the Mark II. Just know that I haven't heard the Mark IIs, and specifically we're talking about the Mark Is here. So without wishing to blabber on a lot, let's get going on the first video with Kevin. Now, I don't have any affiliation with either of these guys. I don't know Kevin or Steve Guttenberg. They don't know me. I have no affiliation whatsoever with Upscale Audio. Just kind of pick these two as major reviewers and relatively complimentary videos. So let's get to it. Kevin, what you got for us here?
Hi, this is Kevin Deal from Upscale Audio, and today we're going to talk about the Cambridge Audio CXA81. I heard this over in the sound room. I said, oh my God, and I noticed, we really sell a lot of these, and I said, you know, we really got to break it down for people and show them what makes this such a special product. Cambridge Audio is a very, very old company. They've been around for a long time, and they've been known to be super high value, great engineering, great build quality, not a lot of buzzers and whistles. It goes into the guts and it goes into the sound quality.
Yeah, that was a big draw for me when I was shopping around for an integrated at this level. I knew that Cambridge Audio was one of those that kind of focused more on the internals rather than flim-flam and filling their stuff full of features that I may or may not actually need or find very useful.
And they just have a storied reputation that goes back to the late 60s, and I've always really respected what they are about. It is a classic British brand.
Yeah, there's videos about the history of Cambridge Audio out there on YouTube. It's kind of an amusing story.
So the CXA80, which was the predecessor to this, was a pretty popular piece. It was super popular, right? It was considered by a lot of people best in class. But I gotta tell you something. As good as it was, it does not compare to this. It does not compare to this. This is a case of coming out with something with very, very intelligent engineering and leaving things out on purpose that should not be there in order to increase performance and not waste money on it. So what does that mean? First off, it doesn't have a phono stage. Now, a lot of people don't use analog. And if you do, I don't know that I would necessarily use one that's built into an integrated amp.
Yeah, for sure. Especially at this level, you know, some integrateds do have okay phono stages, but I think in this price class, it's going to be hit or miss. you're going to be able to do better with even a relatively budget-oriented external phono stage. Personally, I am a vinyl guy in my A system. I use this amp in my B system, which is my living room system. I use it for watching TV, watching movies, playing some console games through it, and I also do light music listening to it when I don't feel like firing up my big rig and waiting for the tubes to warm up and all that. With that said, I don't use vinyl in my B system, and I always felt like if I did want to add a turntable into that rig, yeah, I would just buy the Cambridge Audio external phono stage or some other competing product for 150, 250 bucks. You could do way better than what would probably go into these integrateds. I would rather the manufacturer spend that money on other things inside this product. So I'm with Kevin on this one.
Because a lot of times they're going to be kind of a throw-in anyway.
Exactly.
And the phono stage market is one part of this industry where you guys get a great deal. What do I mean? It's a very competitive market. And so for $200, you can get a phono stage that's moving coil, moving magnet, dual mono with adjustable loading, and an outboard power supply. Now, the outboard power supply will be a little dongle thingy, so it's not going to be anything that rocks the world, but still,
yeah, I mean, it's not going to be super fancy, but just not having that connected to the power supply in this amp really is worth something. Why have something pulling current off the power supply in your integrated when you don't have to? You'd rather have that current going to the amplifier stages.
$200, right? You can even get one for $100 and keep it as a separate product outside of the integrated amp, and that's really what you should do.
Agreed.
But instead of adding a crappy phono stage that you're not going to use, what they did on this new model is they put better digital into it.
Exactly, and that was a selling point for me, was that I wanted something with really, really good, or at least very respectable integrated digital. I wanted something better than the DAC boxes I already had on hand.
So this has got the ESS 9016 chipset in it, and that is a very, very nice sounding DAC.
Yeah.
Is it like a Berkeley or something? No, it is not. Is it respectable, and does it sound good compared to a Wolfson or something? Absolutely. So
yeah, it's a pretty clean and lively sounding DAC. We'll talk more about that a little bit later in the video, but so far I'm definitely with Kevin on this. Even though he's selling these things, what he's saying is true.
For the majority of the people that are in this category of product, it is a bitchin' way to go. What else is it missing? It does not have a balance control.
Okay, Mr. Potty Mouth. Yeah, no balance control. Good. Good. That's a good thing. That's another thing that you don't need and don't want to have to pay for, and you don't want that creating more circuitry that you don't need. You keep your circuitry a little bit more pure there. If you need a balance control, something else besides your amplifier is the problem in your system. It's a speaker placement issue, or it's a room acoustics issue. Outside chance you could maybe have a cabling issue, some damaged conductors. That's pretty rare. It's probably speakers or room.
And I got to get over this, because I read a review where people go, it doesn't have a balance control. Thank God it doesn't have a balance control, because if it had one, you wouldn't want to use it anyway.
Exactly.
Listen, if you have a channel imbalance in your system in your home, and it is very common to have that, you don't fix it with a balance control, because if you adjust it a little bit this way when you're listening to this music, but then you raise the volume up or lower the volume, it's not going to be the same, and you're never, ever going to get it right. Channel imbalances occur when you have a room with a wall over here, and then this side of the room opens up to another room, and then you're going to have it's going to be harder to pressurize that open space, and because of that, then the center fill is going to move over this way.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that, or it could be that you've got a bunch of furniture on one side of the room that is well padded and is absorbing a lot of sound waves, and then maybe on the other side of the room you've got a row of big glass windows and it's creating a ton of bounce or whatever. There's a substantial pressure imbalance or something else like that going on in your room, and that's the problem. And boy, I caught Kevin at a funny sort of look there. Sorry,
So
Kevin.
you need to get used to the idea. We have a speaker setup disc that we send out to customers, and I'm going to give you one tip from that. Get used to the idea of taking that channel that is at a lower volume and moving that speaker towards you. That's what you have to do. So if the center channel is veering over this way, this speaker needs to come towards you in order to get the center fill back where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. It's the whole thing is a little bit more complicated than he's letting on. And, what does moving a speaker towards you really mean? It could be that depth-wise, it needs to go further towards you or further back into the room relative to the other one, to your listening position. Could be a toe-in issue. It could be like a lateral thing, like the speakers are, one speaker is further apart than the other relative to your listening position. The upshot is that there's some kind of symmetry issue there. So, yeah.
Fix it with speaker positioning. Don't fix it with a balance control.
Exactly. You really need to solve problems at the root cause of the problem. Trying to fix it with your amplifier when the problem isn't your amplifier is not a good solution. It'll just create other problems for you.
It has 3 sets of digital in, which is really, really cool. It has 4 sets of line in. You're going to notice that one of the sets of line in is a balanced in.
Yeah, there's a balanced in there. I was a little bit surprised to see that. I think some sources now are starting to offer balanced output. Maybe Cambridge's own products do. I don't really use their other products, but yeah, if you have one of these and you're using the balanced inputs, let me know in the comments what you're using it for. I'd be curious. And before he goes on to talk about that more, something else I'm going to point out here is the speaker binding posts. Now, these are something that I have not been satisfied with on this unit. Reason being, these binding posts really are only made to accept banana plugs or bare wire. They do not readily accept the spade lugs that you might be finding, especially on some higher end cabling. And I think Cambridge Audio might have gone, well, who at this level is using really fancy higher end cables that have big spades on them? Well, I have one of these and I use those, so it was an issue for me. So the upshot is that you can't really see it in this still, and maybe I'll try and throw like a photo if I can get a good photo of it or something. But basically, these posts have some little plastic ears on them that prevent you from being able to get spade lugs onto these posts. And what I had to do was basically modify this to make it work. I took some needle nose pliers and I basically gently bent and snapped off these little flimsy pieces of plastic, and now I can get spades on there. But I really, really resent that I had to modify or basically break, these binding posts to be able to make them work with all types of cabling terminations, especially considering that those little plastic ears weren't doing anything. I mean, they're really not enabling you to do anything else with these posts. They were just preventing decent size spade connectors from going on. So I snapped them off and it works fine, but I really, really resent that. Cambridge Audio should have put better binding posts on this unit, especially considering this is really kind of getting into a little bit more of a higher end territory over mid-fi. So that's my comment on the binding post. Other thing that I notice in this shot is you get a detachable power cord that's really refreshing to see at this level. Cambridge Audio could have just stuck us with a captive lousy little lamp cord, and they didn't. And I really appreciate that you can supply your own cable at your preferred length, or if you're somebody that likes playing around with upgrade power cords or something like that, you could do that too.
And I noticed, I was curious how they did that, because at a more reasonable price point, having a balanced in is not that common. So
No,
I
it's
figured they
not.
were really cheating on this, but they were not. Now, they did not do the XLRN transformer coupled, because that's way too expensive. Could not happen.
Yeah, and transformer coupling, I mean, there's always the risk that the transformers are going to add their own sort of coloration to the signal. So, you know.
But I looked over here with my handy dandy flashlight, and I see some ICs over here. So they did it a really nice, a very, very elegant way. So you
Yeah, I think their implementation of the balanced ins is fine. Other thing I'm seeing there is an 85-degree big blue electrolytic capacitor there. I would have preferred to see all higher temp, like 105-degree capacitors used throughout the build. That would have been nice. Now, Cambridge Audio is still trying to hit a price point with this unit. I think it's reasonable if they're going to put the lower temp caps in parts of the build like the line stages, as long as they're using higher temp caps around things like heat sinks in the power amp section and the power supply section. That's a reasonable compromise to be made there.
can enjoy the balanced output from your source component if you have that. It has a mono subwoofer out. It has a preamp out.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to run stereo subs, you can always use that preamp out as long as you don't need it for something else.
Has 2 sets of speaker jacks. Now, this is an 80 watt per channel amplifier, right?
At 8 ohms.
It seems to do really well with relatively low impedance loads. So frankly, it'll drive just, about anything.
Yeah, I've used this with 8 ohm speakers and 4 ohm speakers also. I think it does okay with those.
Would I not use it with? Maybe I wouldn't use it with a pair of Maggie, 0.7, something like that. I mean, some of these little reactive speakers are low impedance and really low sensitivity. But I gotta say,
yeah, I mean, as far as the Magnapans go, any planers they need just bucket loads of power. However much you think you could get away with, double it or triple it. They always just need so much power. 80 watts at 8 ohms. I wouldn't try to run Maggies on.
Just about anything in my store, you're going to get great results with it. It's got speaker A, speaker B, then you can run all 4 of them at once. I don't know if they are wired in parallel to each other or in series.
It's parallel. And you want to keep in mind, if you are using the A and B speakers together at the same time, maybe you're trying to run the same music to 2 different rooms at the same time, you want to make sure that both speaker sets are pretty conservatively 8 ohms. You don't want to, use 8 ohm speakers that are spec'd at 8 ohms, but they're always really dipping to 5 or 6 ohms. If both sets were doing that, you could really stress out the amp. They do not claim that this thing is stable down to 2 ohms. It does okay at 4. Just keep that in mind if you're running multiple speaker sets at the same time. You want them to be kind of conservative and efficient that way.
Speaker A and speaker B, so if you run all 4 speakers, sound quality might degrade slightly, and that's kind of a common thing. Gosh dang. Oh, and then I looked over here. Look at this power transformer. I mean, this is really, really badass. And you guys know, guys and gals know, I love toroidal power transformers.
Yeah, Mr. Potty Mouth. Well, yeah, I'm in agreement with him. It's nice to see a nice power transformer in this. No, it's not the humongous 50-pound thing that you would find in ultra high-end products, but for this type of amp and this type of build, it is nice to see that. I have read that they're using separate taps for the pre and power amp sections in the left and right channels. So if that is true, that's definitely the way to go. And especially at this level, refreshing to see. It's a decent power supply in this thing.
I'll tell you why, because they are quieter. They do not radiate EMI outside of the core of the donut, and manufacturers have a tendency to not use them as much because they're more expensive. It takes a lot more material to make them, and then they are more difficult to make than just regular run-of-the-mill transformers. But
yeah, and this is another indicator. This is the kind of thing you're getting in this amp. Instead of a phono stage, you're getting a better power supply that every user of this amp will benefit from. Every single feature in this amp benefits from that. So I think that's a really good compromise there once again. I'm happy to see where Cambridge Audio is kind of throwing the money at in this build.
They did that here, and I have to applaud them. Great big heat sinks for the output devices. And I looked over here at the filter caps. The filter caps are nice.
Yeah, I do notice that those are high temp, 105 degree capacitors in the power supply and right next to those heat sinks. That's where you need to see higher temp caps. That'll improve long-term reliability for sure. Other note I would have is this amp, you know, it runs warm. It's a Class AB amp. It doesn't run hot. This thing isn't, you know, putting out crazy amounts of heat, but it's well ventilated so that the warmth it is putting out is at least getting out of the unit too.
6,800 microfarads times 2. So what is that? 6,800, 13,600 microfarads per channel. That's why the bass response is really super respectable.
Yeah, this has a pretty clean and articulate bass response, very respectable, like he says. I mean, that amount of capacitance is not like super earth-shattering compared to really high-end products, but at this level, it's very respectable.
And it ran with any speaker that I threw at it. I mean, look, it is just a cool piece. It's got all this RS-232 and control stuff on the back. We don't deal with that stuff here. We are knuckle dragging Neanderthals. We don't do multi-room stuff. Not our gig.
Yeah, I must be a Neanderthal too because I don't use that stuff. But if you have like a whole stack of Cambridge components, that could be handy for you.
But it does have that if you want to use it. And then it just looks nice. Volume control is analog, not a chip. I applaud them for that too. They could have done this as a really cheap volume control. I'm talking about something that would cost $1.50 to implement, and you might never even know the difference. They did not do that. Analog, motorized volume control, nice remote control.
Yeah, the volume control is nice. I agree with them. They could have gone with just some cheap digital volume control. They didn't. I'm happy about that too. The volume pot has a okay feel in your hand, especially at this level. I think it's fine. As far as the remote control, one bone I have to pick with it is when you turn the volume up or down with the remote, no matter how much you try to just barely blip the button a little bit, you get a really large increase or decrease in volume. It's very hard to just make a smaller change in volume with the remote, and that really bugs me.
Just a bitchin' amp. Look.
All right, Mr. Potty Mouth again. As far as the remote goes too, he's calling it a nice quality remote. I don't totally agree. Now, the thing is, it looks the part, and it feels nice in your hand. It's got an okay weight and a decent size to it, and it controls many things, but I think underneath that facade is still kind of a cheap PC board. My remote sometimes is not super responsive. You'll have to push buttons a couple of times to get them to take sometimes. And the range of the remote control is not great. The IR sensor range is not great. So you really kind of have to point the remote directly at the front of the unit. If you're way off to the side of the room at a weird angle, it's probably not going to work. So I really think, even though the remote has that sort of size and weightiness that you used to get from remotes, say, like in the 1990s, it doesn't act the part while looking at. I really wish for better performance overall from the remote. Not sure if that's common to all of these units, or if I just got maybe kind of a janky remote, but I haven't been very happy with my remote.
I love it when people I'm on the side of the consumer, right? I think that I just love it when people can get a good deal and get something that they can own and be proud of. By the way, when you get this, it's going to take some break-in. I noticed that. And you want to make sure any amp you buy from us, any speaker you buy from us, it takes 500 hours to break these things in. Really.
Well, that's a pretty controversial thing. Of course, there's people out there who refuse to accept that break-in is even a thing. In my experience, it is. I've heard it. I think break-in is most critical for components that have like moving parts that determine their sound. So loudspeakers, headphones, phono cartridges. Break-in is really critical and very audible with those. As far as an amplifier like this, 500 hours is kind of a lot if you don't want to do that. I personally don't think you have to. When I get a component like this, I get some music playing through it on a nonstop loop, and I leave it at a low volume to just play nonstop for like a good 3 or 4 days, and I call it good. You know, give 100 hours before you're judging this thing too much, and you should be okay. If you want to give it 500, you can. You know what? You do you, and just trust your ears on that.
Get them into their groove. But the thing is, we give you a 60-day money-back guarantee at Upscale Audio because we want to make sure that you're happy. So look, go to our website, talk to my wonderful non-commissioned salespeople, let them know what you're trying to have happen. We really want to listen to you because at Upscale Audio, we want to make sure that we treat your system like it's ours. Thanks.
Okay, free plug for you there, Kevin. Again, I've got no affiliation at all with Upscale Audio. Now let's move on to the Steve Guttenberg video. I'm going to do a little cut here, and we'll see what Steve has to say.
So I can't say I've reviewed that many Cambridge Audio components over the years, but it seems like every time I do, I'm reminded how good they are and how they have a different kind of approach than most. Let's see, I don't want to use the word mid-fi because they're way above mid-fi, but
well, let's talk a little bit here really quick about where this kind of fits into the whole equipment hierarchy, I guess. You know, this unit is hitting a price point where it would either be really good mid-fi or entry-level high-end. Personally, I would call this amp entry-level high-end. You're really starting to get a level of fidelity out of this amp that I would say sort of warrants that stature. For most people, this is all the amplifier and all the fidelity that most people are going to need. I am a fastidious nut job who has the higher dollar equipment in my A system. I bought this as a B system, and I didn't want something that was just going to be a cheap bargain basement, sort of big box store receiver. I knew I was going to want something better than that because I know what good sounds like. At the same time, I did not want to spend $5,000 on an integrated just for my living room setup when I had a really nice system in its own dedicated room. So yeah, entry level, high end here, it would satisfy most people who are not total nut jobs. For me personally, as a total nut job, I don't necessarily think that I would be satisfied with this as my only amplifier, but it's because I'm weird. And for the average person, you know, if you're looking at this and you don't consider yourself like a super high-end audiophile aficionado, if you're looking at this, then you probably care about having something that's going to be better than that, you know, $300 Sony or Yamaha or whatever the big box stores are selling. So, you know, if you're looking at this, you care enough to get some better fidelity, and this thing will give it to you. So that's what I would say to that. It's really something a little bit better than mid-fi. I have a mid-fi Yamaha receiver in my kitchen, just running my kitchen in-wall speakers, and the Cambridge Audio CXA81 for sure. It's a good solid notch above that one. So,
you know, not crazy high-end and not budget-oriented companies.
Yeah, there you go.
We're like, we're going to make really good stuff, but we're not going to like make you take out your wallet and empty it completely.
Yeah, it's a good step up.
You know, they're very British that way, I guess. They're a little understated, minimalist, you could even say. Like this amplifier, the CX, now in its Series 2 versions.
Now, just to be clear, he's not saying Mark II. He's saying instead of a CXA80, it's now the CXA81. This is still a Mark I he's reviewing.
CXA81 stereo integrated amplifier. Well, it's an 80 watt per channel amp, 80 watts into 8 ohms, and 120 watts into 4 ohms.
Yeah, so some amplifiers double at 4 ohms. This one is half again, 120, not 160.
What else? Oh, it's a Class AB amplifier. Not something you see every day anymore. Those are getting a little rare. But this one is definitely AB, not Class D.
Yeah, I mean, Class D is really starting to mature more. I don't think Class D is quite the terrible thing that it used to be, but I still like a Class AB amp. I think it's that kind of nice middle ground where you can still get some musicality, and yeah, it does put off a little more heat than Class D.
And it has a big honking power transformer right in the middle of the chassis there. Weighs 19 pounds. It feels really solid for an 80 watt.
It does, I agree. Okay, I've done a quick little edit here to pull out some parts of Steve's review that were just redundant to what we already covered with the Kevin video. He just went over some basic features, and he also pointed out that it doesn't have a phono stage, and yeah, you don't need one because you can get a decent little phono box external.
Other things that are missing that I do wish were there were bass and treble controls. I like tone controls.
Well, I don't, and I'm glad that it's not there. So sorry, Steve, got to disagree with you on that. You don't need those, and it's another thing that you shouldn't be paying for in a build because you don't need it. I support Cambridge leaving those out of this amp. I think it's another indicator that they're really trying to push this unit more upscale, and the decisions that they're making are kind of more of a high fidelity type of ethos. So, you know, as far as tone controls, you shouldn't need them. I understand that some people maybe have lost some high frequency hearing and they want to nudge up the treble, or maybe they just like really boomy bass and so they want a bass control. There again, though, you really need to attack these issues at the root issue, which is probably going to be your speakers. I think if you need brighter presentation, get brighter speakers. And if you like a bass heavy presentation, get really bassy speakers. You know, I don't know that you should be using the amplifier to do those things. Tone controls do nothing but add distortion to your signal. I am glad this thing doesn't have them so that people don't have the temptation to spoil their nice sounding sound that they're getting out of this thing and that you're paying for with this thing.
And I wish they were there. But they're not.
Good.
Let's see, what else isn't there? A display. There's no actual, readout display. There's indications of what input you're on, that's pretty much it. The front panel has a volume control and buttons to select inputs, and you're done.
Yeah, a really minimalist there design. He's right that there's no digital readout display. I think that's another thing that Cambridge is saving some money on and putting it into other parts of the unit. And much as you don't need one, it would have made certain modes easier. So something that these guys aren't really bringing up is that there are different modes that you can set this unit up with. For example, something that I use is the auto off feature that automatically puts this into standby after 20 minutes of no signal going through it. In standby, these pull maybe 10 watts. When they're running fully on and at idle, it's more like 50 or 60 watts. So there's definitely some power saving when you let it shut itself off. Much as I wish you could switch the time from like 20 minutes to 30 minutes to 60 minutes or something, it's fixed at 20 minutes. You can turn overload protection on or off, and you can also turn off the backlighting for those input selections. It's just basic LED backlighting instead of a digital readout. But to make these changes, it's a little bit clumsy since you don't have the digital display that you can just scroll through and turn these settings on or off. What you've got to do instead is it's like you hold the power button and the speaker AB button together, and then the amplifier goes into this different mode where you can turn these features on or off, and you have to refer to the manual to remember which input buttons control the feature that you want to turn on or off. It's kind of clumsy, but they're the kind of features that you sort of set and forget. You're not going to be changing them all the time, so I think that's a reasonable compromise. My other little complaint here is that although the power button does have a light indicator on it, the light barely changes between being in standby mode and being fully on. So for me, since I keep the backlighting on the inputs turned off all the time, it's hard as heck to know whether this unit is actually fully on or in standby. Just kind of a minor complaint there, but I thought I'd bring it up if you're fastidious like me,
5 millimeter headphone jack. Why? Why can't it have a 6.3 millimeter headphone jack?
Yeah, it's a really weird call to put a mini jack on this. I agree with Steve on that. At this level, if you're using headphones with this unit, you probably have a decent quality headset, and those usually come with the full-size jacks, not the minis.
Normal full-size headphone jack. I don't get the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on a serious component like this. I can't say Cambridge is the only company that's done that, but I find it annoying, actually.
Yeah, not only that, but sometimes on the cheapo budget receivers, you'll get the full-size jack, so make it make sense. I don't know.
A minor annoyance is when you're using the remote, the volume ramp up, ramp down is a little too speedy for me. It's like I'm always overshooting it. It's too loud, no, it's too soft, no, it's too loud. I'm fussy about that kind of stuff, and that.
Yeah, I was talking about that in the last video. It drives me crazy.
And that really does annoy me. But you know, when you live with it and you use it all the time, you can get used to controlling the speed a little better. I'm just passing through with this product, right?
Well, I'm not passing through with this product. I own it, and that is something that drives me crazy every single time I change the volume with the remote on this unit. It drives me crazy that I just can't get exactly the volume I want. The steps are just too big when you're using the remote. I've never measured it, but each button press changes the sound by like probably a good few decibels, and I think it should be half that. If you have a Mark II version of this unit, drop me a comment and let me know if it's the same case with the Mark IIs. I kind of wonder if Cambridge addressed that or not.
So if I live with it, I'm sure I'd get used to the ramp up, ramp down speeds.
Nope.
Oh, I forgot to mention, it has, in terms of digital connections, it has 4 analog connections, but in terms of digital, it has a USB input. Again, not something that's always there on products like this. It has 1 coax and 2 optical inputs. I don't know, one feature.
Yeah, quick note on the digital connectivity. Yeah, it's got a USB. You can hook up a PC to it, and that's nice and whatever. There's a big oversight on this, which is I really wish that there was an HDMI digital in so that I could use ARC out of my smart TV, because again, I use this as a multi-purpose amp. I'm using the optical connection from my smart TV, and that is suboptimal because a lot of smart TVs will downsample their digital outs to 48 kilohertz PCM. Theoretically, optical is only capable of 96, and then some TVs will even downsample it beyond that. So, you know, if you're doing something like watching a movie that has true HD audio, you can't really get that out of optical, and it's really an oversight that you don't have HDMI ARC as an option on this. That's really common with a lot of integrateds. They just, they don't think enough about people like me who might want some video connectivity in addition to just a music system. I can't be the only person who's using this in a multimedia setting, and I don't understand, especially as you start to go up market and get into the higher end, why there aren't more digital connectivity options that would play nicer with video. I would love to have seen that on this.
I use 3 sets of speakers. 3, count 3. 3 sets of speakers in this review. I use the Polk Legend L200 bookshelf speakers, and that I just reviewed, and I'll link to that directly below.
Okay, pretty conventional.
I use the venerable, much loved KEF LS50s.
Interesting.
And to put the little pressure on the amp, I also use the Magnapan LRS, which is a power-hungry, very demanding planar magnetic panel speaker. So I use those 3 speakers.
Yeah, those will torture test this amp.
Now, I found the sound to be, I'm just going to cut right to the chase. This isn't a warm and soft-sounding amplifier.
No, not at all. Quite the opposite. And if you're thinking this is like a British amp along the lines of the more classic British integrateds, I'm thinking of like the Regas and Creaks and maybe Arcams of 20, 25, 30 years ago. This is not that. It's a whole other ballgame. Personally, an integrated I was using before this was an old Rega Brio 2000, and boy, you couldn't have a more different sounding couple of amplifiers here.
at all. It's actually on the cool, slightly cool side of neutral.
I mean, that's subjective. I can see why he's saying that. I do not find this to be a cold sounding amp, but by no means is this thing voiced warm at all. It doesn't have that kind of soft and syrupy type of character. On the contrary, it's very clean, very snappy, very energetic. And some of that is from the ESS Sabre DAC that's built in, and then some of it is just from the amplifier stages on their own.
But the soundstage is huge.
Really nice soundstage.
Bass is really tight and fast.
Yeah, clean and articulate on the bass for sure.
Play uncompressed music like the Dick Hyman Swing record, which is a big band record. Really well recorded, incredibly well recorded album, uncompressed, uneq'd, and I ran that through the 81 and it just lit up. I spent the most time with the LS50s hooked up. And I know those speakers so well, but every time I play them on a different amplifier, they sound completely different. They don't really have a personality of their own, which is one of the reasons why they're useful in the context of doing reviews. So they just had more life, more live sound that I like. I'm always looking for that feeling that this is really happening now kind of sound. And it did that incredibly well.
Yeah, that's really that lively and energetic character you get with this amp. It can really bring your music to life. It really isn't the type of amp that smooths your music over or flatters it, really. It's quite neutral in terms of tonality and in terms of character. Yeah, it really has a sense of energy about it and snappiness. It's really different from like the old Rega that I was using, for example, where that thing had good pace, rhythm, and timing, but it was really kind of a round sounding and a little bit smoother sounding amp. Couldn't be more different from this CXA81, that's for sure.
Especially on this Dick Hyman album, because the Dick Hyman record is an audiophile recording. There's no processing, there's no compression, there's no auto-tune. It's just like, here is this huge band, and they're rocking out, man. They're having fun, and that was fully communicated by the 81. So as things were moving along in the process of doing this review, at one point I turned to my side, and what did I see? I saw a Schiit Bifrost multi-bit DAC digital.
Interesting. Now, I did shoot out a Schiit Audio Modi 3 against the built-in ESS DAC in this unit, and I'm interested to see how Steve's experience compared to mine. Now, specifically, the Modi 3 I was using was one of the AKM chip-based Modis. I want to say that after a while there was availability problems and that company switched over to ESS chips, but the AKM-based Modis definitely have a certain sound to them.
Converter. And I thought, well, let me see how that compares to the built-in converter in the 81. So I hooked it up, and I was actually using an Oppo BDP205 Blu-ray player as a transport. And I hooked it up, and the Bifrost sweetened the sound, was a little more relaxed, a little less on edge.
Yeah, that's how I would describe my experience with the Modis also. So I don't know if we're using the same chip that this one is, but yeah, the Modi was definitely a little bit more relaxed, little bit deeper sounding in the highs and upper mids, little bit more, maybe silky isn't quite the right word, but it wasn't quite as snappy and energetic, and it didn't present quite as in your face as the ESS does. That's maybe not fair to the ESS, but by comparison, the Modi was definitely a little bit more relaxed. Modi definitely had some of its own kind of character and coloration in the mid bass that was, it worked for some types of music, but it didn't really work for other things. And I didn't think it worked as well, especially for things like movies and gaming, where you really want that sense of dynamics and energy. I thought that the ESS Sabre built into the CXA81 works a lot better for more sources.
that's not the right word, but it scaled back the presentation in terms of that live jump factor and just added an ease.
Yeah, I would say that was my experience with the Modi too. And that's kind of nice if you do want a little bit more relaxed sound from your digital sources. But I still say that the ESS built into the Cambridge is a better jack of all trades. If you're only using this thing with maybe you only listen to a couple different genres of music and you want that slightly more relaxed character from the DAC, then yeah, you could use one of those. But if you're doing a lot of different sort of multimedia usage like I'm doing, and especially if you're doing movies and you want that sense of dynamics and you want a really big sound stage, which is important when you're watching movies in 2-channel. I'm not a surround sound guy, and I really rely on having a good dimensional sound stage to be able to feel involved in movies and video games and things like that. But also, of course, for music. So I think you get a lot more of that with the ESS, and it's cleaner and has less of its own tonal character. It's pretty neutral, but for sure it does have a kind of an energetic and snappy type of presentation. So, you either like that or you don't.
That I liked a lot. Now I think the sound of the built-in converter, and I will list all of its specs and stuff directly below, but the sound of the built-in converter is good, but I personally want sweeter. Now, if that's me, you may want and believe me, I have these conversations with
where I sit with that.
Some people want more that snap, that detail. I just met a guy on the street last night. It was
really detailed sound too from this amp, and especially from digital sources via the DAC built in. Very highly resolving, good detail. So it sounds like Steve wants something a little bit different than what this unit actually gives you, but what he is not liking, I am really liking out of the unit. So very subjective.
Telling me this, and he was saying, no, he actually didn't like the RP600M. He thought it was too laid back.
Too laid back. Wow. Oh my gosh. Never have I ever heard any Klipsch speaker that I would call too laid back.
And a lot of people would say it's got a little too much aggression in it. He said, no, I thought it was too laid back. So everybody's looking for different things.
Clearly. Wow. I want to know if you think Klipsch speakers are too laid back, what on earth do you think is right for you? I think something like that would tear my ears off.
The new music I was listening to was from Lucretia Dalt. She does an ambient electronica, but there's this edge to it that I really like. It's a metallic kind of clanging sound. It's electric, it's charged, that's what it is. It's got this pulsing energy that runs through it, but it's not like hit you over the head kind of crazy stuff. No, but there's something going on that I really like, and I was deep into it over the LS50s. I switched over to the LRS, the Magnapans. The Magnapans are just, they don't click with this amplifier. It's a little too anemic sound.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not going to be enough power to push Maggies out of this thing. So I think what he's really describing is just an ultimate lack of power. You need more horsepower for planar type speakers, more than this is going to give you.
That pairing just needed more juice, more warmth. Even with the Bifrost in there, it wasn't really happening for me.
Yeah, because a DAC isn't going to change the fact that you're underpowered. That's really it.
So it's close, but no cigar.
Yeah, so a quick note, he's gone through the 3 different speakers he's used with it. I have also used a few different speakers with the CXA81. Initially, I was using some old vintage Kirksader monitors. I think Monitor 100s or Studio 100s. Basically, they are bookshelf-sized speakers, 8-inch woofers. They're actually 3-ways, but in a small bookshelf-size sealed cabinet. And then the main speakers that I've used most of the time with this is a pair of Hecko Aurora 700s, which I have heavily modified internally. I totally rebuilt the crossovers with much better components, and I rewired them internally and did some upgrades to the cabinets inside. And boy, do I have those things performing much more high-end rather than mid-fi now. They're very, very nice pair of Heckos and much better than stock form. And the Cambridge really keeps up with all those upgrades really well. The Heckos are, I'm not going to say they're super bright speakers, especially not compared to Klipsch, but they're not really laid back speakers either. They use lightweight drivers and they use a pair of sort of smaller size bass drivers, and they have a real articulate and kind of punchy sound, and they're pretty efficient speakers. And you know, that pairs pretty well with the Cambridge in terms of it all being a very sort of energetic and dynamic and highly resolving presentation, huge soundstage, very articulate sounding. I would say with this combination, I would not want the Heckos to be any brighter than they are. I think it would start to get a little too aggressive, but really nice energetic pairing. And then the third speaker set that I used with this amp are the ones out of my A system, which are a big old pair of Freed G3 transmission line speakers. They're the size of small refrigerators. They have large bass drivers, and although they're fairly efficient for the size and type of speakers they do run at 4 ohms. They like a lot of current and control on those bass drivers, and they're definitely more refined, especially on the top end compared to the Heckos. And those are a really cool pairing with the Cambridge Audio as well. I would say that they outclass the Cambridge. They can definitely hang in with much more expensive amplifiers, but the Cambridge does not embarrass itself through those speakers. You still get that sense of energy and snappiness and articulation out of them, and still a very nice sound stage. So, and it gives plenty of power for those speakers as well. Performs nicely at 4 ohms. So yeah, you know, depending on the speakers you give this amplifier, if you had some speakers that were running a little bit on the dark side or on the warm side, I think they would balance really well with this amp, where the amp would help them find a little bit more energy than they would have on their own. If you're running really bright and aggressive speakers, this amp is not going to sugarcoat those at all, though. So something to keep in mind.
The Polk Legend 200, perfecto, really good, because that's sort of a warmish sounding speaker.
There you go.
So again, we get into that speaker amp pairing. Since the L200 is on the warm side of neutral, you pair it with a slightly cool amp and you wind up right in the middle. But yet, for some reason, I kept going back to the LS50. That's the one I know the longest of these 3 speakers, so I guess where I felt comfortable evaluating the sound. Summing up, I think the 81 is a very competent design, very thoughtful, nice balance of features, not too much, not too little, just right. It has, like I said, an audiophile appeal, especially for audiophiles looking for that veer towards high resolution being their top priority.
Yeah, well put. I would definitely agree with that. Really good resolution. If you like detail, if you like soundstage, if you like articulation and energy, this is a good option for you. If you like an amplifier that is a little bit more sweet or syrupy sounding, this is not that. So it just comes down to what you're looking for. But I think Steve's review of this has been fair.
I think it does that extremely well. And I think that's it. My work here is now complete. My name is Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show.
Okay, well, my work is done here too. So yeah, that was Steve Guttenberg. And again, I have no affiliation with Steve. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. So hopefully these guys don't mind me picking on them a little bit with a reaction video. And I hope that all the insights and additional information I've been able to give to you as somebody who has lived with one of these for several years and really done a lot with it has been useful and insightful to you. And I know this video is running long, so only other thing I'll say before we wrap up here is it's been a very reliable amplifier for me. Apart from those sort of complaints about the remote, this thing has never given me any trouble. It doesn't run super duper duper hot, and it's well ventilated. So I would expect it to be pretty reliable in the long run. Knock on wood, it's really been a good runner for me, and I use it pretty much daily. Quite frankly, I use it more than my fancy, expensive A system. So, and it's just because it's a jack of all trades in my system. So, yeah, pretty good amplifier, and I've enjoyed having it. So, thank you for watching this rather long video. If you've stuck with me this far, thank you. You're one of the good ones. I really appreciate you. I'd love to hear your comments if you have anything to say about these amplifiers. Maybe you own one, or maybe you auditioned one but chose something else. I'd love to hear your perspectives and what you have to say about it. Thank you so much for watching this one, and I will see you next time.